Here we are again, Taylor.
That was fast. Kraft warned us.
I'm going to guess there's some people who are going to join us here on this stream who are tired of seeing my mug. I'll tell you that with the Celtics stuff and with all that's going on. Celtics back-to-back games and then massive breaking news regarding the Patriots. But we have it again, another I'm not going to call it a bombshell. What was expected, I guess, how quickly it happened. I thought they'd try to give it time because they wanted it to give Bill his moment and let it breathe. And knowing that Mayo was going to be the successor, there's really no rush to announce it. But everyone kind of had it yesterday once it was reported and learned that the Patriots had already put language in place in their contract with Mayo and filed it with the league to let them know that he was part of a succession plan and basically had already been pre-selected as the next head coach of the organization. And that was submitted to the league, and that allows them to circumvent Rooney Rule practices and just kind of jump right to the, have Mayo jump right to the head of the line. League had okayed it. Now, theoretically, Taylor, they could have still said no and gone in another direction, but that would have been an issue between Mayo and the Patriots. The league, as far as they were concerned, the Patriots could have gone in either direction. It's very clear Kraft has been set on this for a long time. And I'm guessing he didn't think that hard about it. Even when Mike Vrabel's name came up, which was unexpected, maybe he took pause, but I think this has been the path. It got here sooner than people expected, and now it's here. So I'm not going to call you a flip-flopper per se, but I'm going to say you were Team Mayo. You might have jumped out for a second or two, but you like Mayo and you like this hire.
And one thing, I was never like anti-Mayo. My only real hesitation, one, like when the Vrabel news came out, again, I think it was valid for there to be some level of, that's intriguing. And then on top of it, when it was reported that Adam Peters and him might have, been, it wasn't officially a package deal, but they were being connected in reports. So my brain kind of went to, okay, well, then you have a guy with experience and a proven track record, and he may have a general manager coming with him. That's pretty exciting. But the entire time, my thinking was that if the Crafts think Mayo's ready, like the biggest thing is that he isn't experienced, and there's going to be, as we talked about yesterday, no one's going to be right because we don't know until he actually coaches some games and we see how the team responds, yada, yada, yada. But, I swung back to the Mayo side because that was my whole worry was maybe the Crafts don't think it's quite his time yet. Maybe he needs another couple years of cooking. But if the language was in his contract that they were like, yeah, no, as soon as Bill's done, you're our guy. I looked up the report from Ian Rappaport. This only happened 3 other times where it was put in language so you could bypass the Rooney Rule and have a coach be the successor. It happened with the Ravens GM Eric DeCosta. The Colts did it with Jim Caldwell, and the Seahawks did it with Jim Mora. So, not something that happens very often. Clearly shows a lot of faith in Mayo. The locker room absolutely loves him. There was some worry where, again, I keep emphasizing that I know some people want a clean break from Bill Belichick, but I think on the defensive side, that's not really what you want. You want continuity because that was the side that was keeping them in games and made them competitive. Now you have someone that was building the game plans, running the meetings, and someone that players have a massive amount of respect for. There's obviously a ton of other vacancies that they're going to have to fill and other moves that need to be made, but it was it's pretty obvious that they have a ton of faith in Mayo, that they didn't even let the Bill Belichick, have more than a day. He had his day yesterday, but again, Kraft said he was going to move quickly, and now we've got the news, and I'm pretty fired up. I think this is really exciting.
Well, so, and again, I'm going to go back to what I have my 2 thoughts. I believe Mayo has the players in his corner. I think everyone who's ever played with him, I think anyone who's played under him recognizes kind of what he brings, and they like him, and I think they'll play for him. We talked about how daunting it is, but I have no problem hiring an assistant and having somebody say, all right, go for it, do your thing. So it's not that he's inexperienced. I don't mind inexperience. It's like I said, is everything he's learned from coaching, he's learned from Bill. That doesn't mean he's going to do it that way. It's very possible what you learned is what you learned to not do. Like, I see this, and there's plenty of people in that position. You learn under a boss or a supervisor. You take everything that's good from it, but you have your own ideas and your own thoughts. And I'm guessing Mayo's going to be one of those guys. So I'm not prepared to say. I had said flush everything. My fear is allegiances, whatever's left over here. I want a guy to come in with a new staff and a new perspective and new energy. I didn't want a lot of carryover because I just think everything was the well had been poisoned for several years, whether infighting, people looking at each other, and look, there's a bunch of guys who are going to leave anyway, and Mayo is going to bring in his guys. I didn't want that much carryover because I don't want it to feel like half half a makeover. I really did think once you're gone from Belichick, you got to go something new. Mayo may be that new thing. I'm curious what he does with the staff. My number one takeaway is, and you and I have talked about this, this is less important than the next move, which is who's going to be. And it's not lost in it. There's plenty of people in the comments who say this, and a lot of people understand it, but who to replace? It's so hard when you're replacing one person with two people. And who does the other part of Belichick's job is what all of us will concede is the issue with Bill. That the players build. I mean, we've said it so many times for so many years, it's boring saying it again. But Bill the GM screwed Bill the coach. We all believe Bill can still game plan, strategize, prepare a team like no other. It was evidence that he had not lost the room. So Bill's curmudgeonly ways and no fun sort of atmosphere, guys still played for him because the respect was always there. I do believe that people always thought that to the last day, what Bill is doing is giving us the best chance to win, even when he was super conservative with the offense and this and that. It's what he believes we have. And I think anything that Bill didn't do with the offense or anything conservative that they were doing is really more a reflection of, we know we're bad. So we just got to not turn the ball over and see if our defense can keep us in this game, see if we can sneak out a win. He knew it. That's how he coached all year. They still showed up for him. But that next hire is a big, big, big deal. And I wonder, do you think they have it set already, Taylor?
I think there's a lot of options. So one, reports have really come out, especially, I believe it was Albert Breer reported yesterday, how, and we already knew this, but it was reiterated that Bill Belichick was overruling a lot of his scouts who were building relationships on the road and really liked certain players. A.J. Brown and Debo obviously come to mind because they apparently were really close. So in their visits, they were comfortable and joking around with each other. And Bill thought that that was a problem and that they weren't taking it seriously. Instead, N'Keal Harry had a great interview, and obviously Belichick had a relationship with Herm Edwards, and then was just like, I don't really care about all the work that you guys have put in on the road, spend time away from your families, yada, yada, yada. I'm going to take my guy and see how that worked out. So we really don't know how effective their current front office, who's left, could be without him. So we don't know if it means that Matt Groh gets promotion. We don't know if they bring back Dave Ziegler, who obviously didn't work out with the Raiders, but it was also reported that he didn't work out because Josh McDaniels was overruling him, even though Ziegler brought McDaniels to Vegas, which is pretty wild. You also got Elliott Wolf. He could get a promotion within the building. But one person, if Robert Kraft wants to go to Jerod Mayo and say, I want you to bring in someone who you have a close relationship with, that you can grow with and maybe start a new regime with, that could be Trey Brown. So Trey Brown, he spent a few years with the team. I'll pull up his resume right now. I tweeted it just so I'm not saying anything wrong. Yes, so he has a relationship with Mayo. One, that's pretty big. So that was kind of like what I was talking about with Vrabel and Adam Peters, how they had a relationship. The current version would be Mayo and Trey Brown. So Trey Brown was a scouting assistant and area scout for the Patriots from 2010 to 2012. Most recently, he was the senior personnel executive for the Bengals for a few years, and he also rose up the ranks in Philly's front office from 2013 to 2018, obviously around the time they beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl. So he's a guy who has, you talk about you want to get fresh eyes in the building. That's someone who, one, also has a history of drafting receivers, putting a lot of stock into them and drafting them well, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, yada, yada, yada. And he also has success with the Eagles, who have also had success, across the board. And he's with the Bengals. And he was with the Patriots. So championship ties. He's got his New England, Mayo connections, but he also worked elsewhere. So I really do think that they're in a good position where, again, they can either promote internally and keep that continuity if Kraft thinks that there were good decisions that could have been made in the past that weren't because of Bill Belichick's influence. Or, again, if they want to ask Mayo who he wants to grow with and he says, I have a relationship with this guy, he's got outside experience, I'd like to see what he can bring to the table, they can go with Trey Brown. So it's not as daunting a task as I think it might seem when you first think about it, because there's so many things that need to be filled. And there's still question marks with the offense. This isn't a done deal, but they already have their head coach, and a lot of teams are still interviewing people. Vrabel hasn't even taken an interview yet. So I think they're in a good spot, and they have plenty of options that are, that fit the Kraft mold, where they like to keep things in-house or have some sense of continuity.
Fair enough. But I guess ultimately, how do you know that these guys can do it? It's relationships are one thing. This is the leap of faith that is very scary, right? Because
but the relationships, I think, are big because, just look at in New York where, Brian Daboll doesn't get along with his, that was more of his defensive coordinator. But when you have tensions where the head coach doesn't really get along with the general manager, that's where things start to split. But the good organizations like the 49ers, like the Chiefs, the head coach and the general manager work in tandem. And obviously, a lot of these are projections because these guys haven't been general managers yet. So there's going to be speculation, but we don't know. We truly don't. We're just going to have to, see what their resumes are. You can either have confidence based on those, or you can, have your questions. Those are both valid. And then we're just going to have to see how they end up executing. So, there's going to be some level of, I don't really know what could happen, especially when you talk about guys in the Patriots front office, because Belichick had an iron grip on everything that happened and was able to tell people, I don't really care what you think.
Yeah. And look, I think that's going to be the thing. And so much of this is how it's reported, and we don't know, but you're going to trust some people, and I'm sure it's not the entire picture, but the general vibe around Bill was that it's not lack of collaboration. It was, as you said, the final say is the final say, and that's how bosses operate. Give me options, I'm going to make the pick. But as you said in the N'Keal Harry situation, you got to kind of either respect or defer, at times to the people who have put in the work, right? So if you're running stride for stride with the people out there and you're doing close to the same amount of work, or you're studying and scrutinizing all of this, then maybe, look, hey, I've looked at all of this stuff too. My take is slightly different. I think Harry's better than Debo, but it's not. It's based on small things and whims and conversations. The worst part is, well, I talked to another guy who I trust more than you, who coached him or knew him, and I'm taking his word over yours. And that's not a great way to develop a staff and people who want to go out there and do it. So you can't really do that stuff, Taylor. I think that's the kind of thing where, you've seen the brain drain in terms of coaches and other, front office staff. And I think there is a general vibe that people who worked under here weren't allowed to kind of express themselves or grow or, taken seriously. And it was all kind of not under the iron fist. And again, almost all of this is it's exactly the same thing as we talked about, where the things that made him great, attention to detail, control over everything, having his hands in all of it, and this and that, which made him this coaching monster that was, able to do everything that he did during the course of these 20 or so years, ends up being the downfall when things start going wrong, because you're used to being right. He's always done this. And who knows? Maybe he's slowed. Maybe his fastball is slowed. Maybe because the team has been so bad, his attention to what happens, scheming and game planning to not embarrass themselves on the field, has detracted so much from his ability to even look around and see. You think he's watched a college game this year? Would he have been ready to draft? No. Just being an NFL head coach is probably one of the most time-consuming jobs in America. I don't know how you do a dual role. You really have to be, I would imagine, Taylor, 80 to 90%. This is the classic case of hire the people you trust and do what they tell you to do. You can't just be coming in and saying, nah, you can't do it. You're coming from an uninformed place in that. And I think that's tough.
Yeah, and NBC Sports Boston's Phil Perry asked Bill about this during the season. He was like, how much involvement do you have in personnel during the season? And, Bill was saying the right things, where he's like, I'm really not involved because I'm a head coach. That takes up most of my time. If they ask me questions, I get my feedback. But he really made it seem like he was not involved in the personnel department during the season, which makes it even more glaring when there's people who spend all of that time doing the work and the time after that when you start getting involved. And in your limited obviously, Bill Belichick, limited perspective, it's kind of a loaded take to have. But I mean, he doesn't spend as much time as the scouts do. So that made it even more jarring when Belichick himself is admitting that I am not spending a ton of time on the personnel side outside of like meetings and getting updates and all that. But you're saying, no, I don't really value your opinion. It's like, so why are you hiring these people? What's the point? Why are they taking on one of the hardest jobs where you're, I've said this so many times, but I cannot emphasize enough. You're away from your family. You're constantly traveling. It's a very difficult and strenuous job to be a road scout. And then they put in all this work for years where you're building up portfolios on all these players and getting to know them and building relationships. And then it's all for naught. So that's another thing with Mayo that I'm excited about is you finally have someone I feel like who will show respect. And, you know, he's talked about his, I'll actually read something where I asked him a couple weeks ago about his background in business and being outside of football and what kind of perspective that gives him. And he mentioned he feels like he's ready. He said he could talk to men, women, old, young, white, black, it doesn't matter, and hopefully develop those people into upstanding citizens and help them evolve. I feel like my calling is to develop. So he understands the value in people, and it's not all about him. And especially as a former player, I think he'll have a better appreciation for, one, how to treat people. The fact that it's not like Belichick where you start icing people out and you have this really small circle of people you trust, but then you leave others out and start making them feel like they're not important. I think that's a lot of the things that started to fray the organization, especially it's fine when everything works because you're like, how am I going to say no to a guy who just won 3 Super Bowls in 4 years? But it's different when the best quarterback in history leaves and then the success just poof, it's gone, and you don't have as many explanations, and the Bill Belichick luster kind of goes away a bit. So it's another reason why this hiring is really exciting, because I think the way Mayo treats people and handles and carries himself will be a significant difference, and I think attract people who are in the building and are doing well to want to stay and develop under him, rather than maybe wanting to go elsewhere because they know that there's a limit on how high they can get.
Yep, no doubt about it. And so I'm not going to say I have not done my scouting work on this particular thing that I'm going to bring up here, but I was very curious to see, a lot can be kind of conveyed by, what's said after someone is gone. And in terms of someone like Bill, my general vibe was massive respect from everybody who was around him, still kind of maybe like just tired of it. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who viewed it as who have a dueling opinion. Like how good is he at doing what he does? Everyone would say yes. How much did I like having him around or playing for him? You saw the Amendola quote. We played, we worked for Bill and we played for Tom is very telling to me. Yep. Okay. And it's not a knock, but it just things like that help take the temperature of the room for me. And I was kind of looking around to wonder how many flowers would be thrown out there, how many verbal bouquets from past and present towards Belichick on departure day. And I got to say it was less than I thought. But again, I didn't scrub the internet to see if anybody who's ever played for him said something on their Instagram. But just following along, I thought it would be a bigger, and I didn't see it as much. Not to say it didn't happen, and of course it did, and there was a lot of really nice tributes, and everybody will acknowledge the GOAT, but I do believe that just the vibe and the temperature, of things out there was, like that whole kind of we had to get there. So Mayo represents that refreshing new stuff. You talk about, I talked about bringing in an outside vision, but I think bringing in a coach like Mayo completely changes the culture instantly in the building. I'm curious as media members what happens. Like, I know the players and anybody playing under Bill and coaching under Bill understands how his stoicism paid off and understands the Patriots way of not giving bulletin board material and just keeping it to yourself, not getting too high, not getting too low. Don't praise yourself when you do well. Just talk about getting better. There's a benefit to that because you're just not giving anything out there that could potentially hurt you. Belichick took it to a ludicrous degree with how little he would tell you. What'd you have for breakfast? I don't know. There were some things we had, some things we didn't have, some things I might have in the future. All in all, we're just trying to have a healthy meal. We're going to keep working on it. Like, just tell us you had cereal.
Right. It's not that serious.
Sorry, my camera blinked out.
You're good.
But
I like that analogy though. You were cooking.
But Mayo represent. I'm curious because he's a big personality guy. Even in the small times that I know you reposted the clip with him kind of laughing and joking about Hightower and maybe he's going to come in with my next guy. But that's still how he talks. That's how his vibe is. He's got a big personality. He's a fast talker. He's funny. He's smart. He's bright. I'm curious how it's going to change across the board. It's going to be felt, I think, everywhere in a very profound way very quickly. That stuff gets old fast when you don't have control of what's happening on the football field. So there's the downside to being the affable player's coach is you better have your shit together because you could lose the room quick. We'll see how that goes, but the culture change is going to be automatic.
And I understand the hesitation of like the Bill Belichick coaching tree. I totally understand because usually it doesn't go well. But I think there are some important differences with Mayo. One thing that I don't think is going to be talked about a lot because it may be an uncomfortable thing for people to discuss, the fact that he is a black head coach. That is significant. Josh Uche said himself, I have a coach who looks like me. Players care about that. Having someone who has a shared background and a shared life experience, they care about that kind of thing. It makes it easier to relate to players, understand where they're coming from, talk to them about certain things. And Belichick, and young. Yes, it's a completely different perspective. And look, who is one of the few coaches of the Belichick tree who actually had success away from the team? Brian Flores. Yeah. And what did players say about him? The same thing. It was very, very similar to Jerod Mayo, except I think Jerod's a little more charismatic and, he's his own person. But this is very significant. So you also get the fact that, again, I think it is valuable that he got to learn under Bill because all the things that worked, why would you want to change? Like, obviously, you get to see what didn't work. And having played under him, it's a perspective that very few people have. And Vrabel, obviously, like, he got to play under Bill, but he also didn't see how Bill evolved or tried to evolve or didn't evolve as a head coach in his time away from the building. And I know it's easy to look at the experience with Bill and turn that into a negative, but be fair, acknowledge that, yes, maybe there are some things that will go poorly where like maybe he does pick up bad habits that he'll have to learn from. Acknowledge those fairly. But you can't just look at the bad and not take the good, where this is still a coach who people were saying shouldn't get fired because of he was still effective as a coach. It was the general manager's part that got him in trouble. So
there's a lot to it. There's more to it. And I agree with you 100%.
And the way that he treated people was the biggest thing, where he's not looking at Robert Kraft when they pass each other in the hall. I thought it was not crazy, but pretty damning that with Wes Welker, they wouldn't even look at each other. These
That's
guys
so
who
weird to
each
me.
other twice a year. And obviously, like the foot thing, and Wes was a smart ass and Bill didn't like that. They never got over it. Bill really did hold grudges.
And the contract thing. Yeah.
And the contract thing, Brady ended up leaving because he was sick of being antagonized, which you understand to a degree. Like everybody talks about it. Randy Moss talks about it. Anybody who was in the building with Brady will be like, yeah, it was crazy. Like Bill would light him up in front of the room and it would set the tone. But, I think that there was also an element to that where Bill told him beforehand when it was going to happen. But when you are a 6-time Super Bowl champion, 40-year-old Tom Brady, shit gets old, man. Like it starts to wear on you, and it did, and that was the reason that he left.
So that's the thing is, look, I think you could make that case more if the players had kind of tuned it out, because honestly, I thought that might happen this year. So to Bill's credit, he held it together, and I think that's out of deference and respect. But you're right. It's not relatable. There was a recent article we read. I read was, describing Bill's personality. And there's been stories in the media where like, actually, he's pretty funny. He's kind of sort of dry funny, which means he's not a robot. But the reality is, I forget which player it was, but it was very much what you guys see is what we get. This is how he communicates with us.
Yeah. Robert said that yesterday. He's like, you guys know Bill as well as I do. I was like, what?
Yeah.
Why do we know Bill as well as you do?
Dude, that documentary, the special that came out and focused a lot on that 2009 team when they were going bad and Belichick's on the sideline saying to Brady, I can't figure out how to get these guys to play for me. There's a moment in that where Kraft walks in the room and they know the camera's on and Bill's like, what? Like he didn't want to talk to him. He's like, what are you doing here, old man? Like, are you lost? The bathroom's over here. Like, that's how he treated him. Like, can somebody come get their grandfather? Like he'd wandered off. He just didn't treat him like the owner of the franchise as if they were working in tandem. He's like, you just pay people the money and let me do don't come into my office to tell me stuff. But look, the black head coach thing, the young black head coach thing, yes, this is a league that's 60% black. In the NBA, it's a league that's 70-something% black. This was a conversation that was had regarding Brad Stevens. I think it's something even Brad Stevens acknowledged and recognized about himself. I'm not the guy to lead these guys. They need a guy who's a little bit closer to them and who might see things with some similar perspective. That matters. Like Ime Udoka, granted it ended poorly for different reasons, was a hard-nosed player coach. And former coach who played, and, in his 40s, not a 72-year-old guy. So yes, that absolutely factors in, and you're going to get a lot of people who, feel more comfortable, like they can talk to a guy like he's talking to them. You hear this a lot. Like, I want to be talked to like a man, not like I'm just like, some employee or some whatever. Ultimately, they all have jobs to do. So it's a fine line between being the guy everybody likes and the guy everybody listens to. And that's fine. So I agree with that point 1,000%. Amit, I'm reading something here from Ian Rappaport.
I got the tweet up. So Ian Rappaport just tweeted, as the Patriots plot out a new direction and set out to hire a GM, a few names to consider with ties to New England. Former Raiders GM Dave Ziegler, former Titans GM John Robinson, Chiefs assistant GM Mike Borgonzi. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I'll be totally honest, I've never heard it out loud. 49ers assistant GM Adam Peters, and Bengals exec Trey Brown. So we mentioned a few of those names already.
So,
and one thing to kind of be worried about if you're talking about kind of the opposite of Trey Brown, where they value the wide receiver position and they invest in it well, John Robinson is the one who traded away A.J. Brown. He did help the Titans become a legitimate team and become one of the better teams in the AFC, so you got to give him his flowers. But that was a pretty insane move and one that kind of charted the downfall of the Titans. And then, obviously, the Chiefs have the worst receiving core for any team not named the Patriots. So obviously they've still built a great defense. The Chiefs have a history of success. I'm not going to act like that hasn't been the case, but their receiving core outside of Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill has not been good for years. It was great, obviously, when they had Hill and Kelce because you had to defend two juggernauts and it made everybody else better, obviously, with Patrick Mahomes. Then you started to see last year they were still good, but they were just a yak machine. It was Travis Kelce doing his thing, and Juju obviously was their leading receiver as more of an underneath target. And then you got some occasional deep shots to Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who would also drop in stuff. So just to put things into perspective, the other names that we didn't mention are names where I would have hesitation for a team that really needs to rebuild on offense.
Yep. No doubt. And I want to, this isn't a matter of, pushing back on a report. I just want to be clear. The phrasing of this tweet is not reporting that they're interested in these people. It is simply saying, here's guys who make sense. It's a list. These are ties.
They're guys with ties to the Patriots.
So we've yet to know where they're going or who they're going with. One would lead you to believe, and again, this is the kind of weird backwards nature of coach first, GM second, is, I think it strongly indicates internal hire because you feel like it might have been pre-vetted, and I don't think they've talked to anybody anymore. And the Bill news has just happened. Doesn't mean you're not bringing in other people, but again, you've created a situation where a GM is coming in and doesn't get to pick their coach, which is less than ideal. So you're already starting. I'm not going to say from behind. Starting with a guy like Mayo may be positive for some people and be like, that's who I would have picked too. I love this guy. I think he's great. But some people might be like, I really needed my own guy and my own vision. I'm not interested. So it leads you to believe that it might be potentially an internal situation, which again, we're talking about, Trey here as the primary, though a guy like Ziegler, who was recently here, might have already been on board, with the understanding that Mayo is going to be the guy and they have a relationship. So I could see something like that, someone in their recent past. But
also important to remember that Bill could take somebody as well because he
Yes.
needs the GM wherever he goes.
A
So
total
that's important.
cold call name. I wonder whether Bill's going in with full power or nothing in his next place too. You think Bill's listening to someone? I don't know, but different
Oh yeah,
conversation.
of course, yeah.
Different conversation that we'll have another time. Couple of programming notes as we kind of bring you the breaking news. And if you're jumping in now, obviously you know the news. Patriots are set to hire Jerod Mayo as their next head coach. 37 years old. He'll be the youngest head coach in NFL history, which is amazing. He's only a couple months younger than Sean McVay, who just finished his 7th season. So it's just banana land.
Yeah,
You forget because McVay's been around so long, he's almost retired already, and he's not even 37.
He thought about it too. He thought
I
about
know.
retiring for a
He's
second.
almost retired a couple times. And it's bananas that he was the youngest coach until an hour ago. A couple of programming notes. Taylor is going to be talking to Chad Graff later today. Is it noon, did we say?
I'm going to get back to him because this kind of threw a wrench in the plans a little bit. So we're going to connect again. But it's going to be sometime this afternoon before 5.
Okay, so Chad Graff had a really interesting kind of behind-the-scenes look at the stories and maybe kind of some of the not so happy vibes behind the scenes at Foxboro that made it, we're not going to go as far as to say toxic, but made it kind of like not as great a place to work or to be around in an environment where people weren't happy necessarily. And obviously when you mix, I don't love going to work with I'm not getting paid well, but I'm not getting the results either. It turns into what it turned into. And I think the combination ultimately is one of the reasons things kind of went the way they went and why it moved so quickly and why Kraft probably had made his mind up that, yeah, I can only take one more season of Bill if we're not going to get the results because he knows the things that aren't great, but the great things were so great, you'll tolerate it forever. But it's a results business. This is how it works everywhere, Taylor. You work somewhere, you got some diva a reporter like yourself who's awesome. I'll tolerate. No, I'm just kidding. But you see that happen. The guys who are the stars get star treatment. And you look the other way on a lot of things until they stop getting the results. And then all those other things are the reason that they're not around anymore. That's fine. One programming note we know for sure, coming up right after this at 10 o'clock, Andrew Callahan is going to go live on this channel. Boston Herald's Andrew Callahan, who also has had a couple of multiple outstanding reports throughout the course of the season. It really has a good understanding and handling of this kind of what's been going on in Foxboro, talked to a ton of people, has reported a lot, knows a lot on spec, and can provide a ton of context on how things got to where they were and how things got to where they are. And he's bringing on Michael Hawley, who is probably the closest thing we have and might be the preeminent Bill Belichick historian on the planet right now. He's spent the majority of his life covering the Patriots. He's written books on Bill. He's spent time with him. He knows him well. It's a really interesting conversation. You absolutely want to stick around for that. Coming up at 10 o'clock, we'll remind you guys again, but we'll roll as close to that as possible, jump off. Those guys will jump on and take it from there. So you want to keep the talk going, listen to a couple of guys who really have some really good inside dirt on that stuff. Hang here on this channel at 10 o'clock. Watch that podcast live. It's going to be great. I did want to ask a couple other questions here, Taylor. Mm-hmm. I know it's early and we're just now trying to put pieces together. Mayo's the guy and they have this. Who's coming back?
In terms of the coaching staff.
And start with the big boys.
So yesterday at Belichick's,
is Steve Belichick going to be the DC? That's what I want to know. I'm just kidding.
No, it's. I mean, I would assume he's going to go with his dad. But the people who were at Bill and Robert Kraft's joint press conference, were cornerbacks coach Mike Pellegrino, former lacrosse player. He's such a good coach. I'm almost in denial, but he's probably going to end up following Bill. Defensive line coach DeMarcus Covington was there. So I think like anybody who was in that room, or also Bill O'Brien was there to be fair, but I think those two guys, in terms of members of the defensive staff, that was pretty telling. I think Bill O'Brien, though, is still under contract. And with Josh McDaniels obviously being a free agent, it's almost a lock that he's going to become Bill's offensive coordinator. So I think Bill O'Brien stays. But from there, it's kind of, you don't really know from the offensive coaches because that wasn't Mayo's side of the ball. He probably didn't have really strong relationships with them. Obviously, the Belichicks aren't going to be there. I think DeMarcus Covington stays. I think maybe he becomes your new defensive coordinator officially, especially if Steve ends up going. But it's really a tough call in terms of the offense or special teams because you don't know how Mayo feels. But defense, one that I feel pretty confident in is DeMarcus Covington staying with a bigger title. But the rest of it, it's up in the air. You really just don't know.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know. I guess the Bill O'Brien is the big domino. I don't know how much he enjoyed his reunion with Belichick. I don't know how much Mayo thinks that he's the guy with the vision to drive things forward. I'm very curious there what happens. I really am.
That's one thing. Whenever we end up getting Jerod Mayo's press conference, I do want to ask him because as a head coach, you may not be coaching special teams or offense, but you do need an overarching philosophy. Like you look at guys like John Harbaugh, who has his background in special teams, or Mike Tomlin, who in his organization is more of a CEO, where he doesn't specifically coach offense, defense, or special teams. He runs everything. But with all those guys, you need some vision of what you want your team to be. Like on offense, do you want to modernize the offense? Do you want to be, modern ground and pound or what have you? So I am going to ask Jerod Mayo, like, what would you like your offensive identity to be? Because that's going to end up determining who he has as offensive coordinator, because Bill O'Brien's not really a big run guy. Like you saw, even when Mac was struggling, even when Zappe was in there, we expected they were just going to run. That was not the case. They were still going downhill. I think they were like at best like middle of the pack to lower end of the spectrum in the league in terms of running the football, which is the opposite of what Josh McDaniels does. Usually they're like in the top 10 range. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of offense Jerod Mayo wants to run to complement his defense.
Yep, no doubt about it. I don't know. We don't know because you know what?
Yeah.
Like we don't know anything about Mayo other than the players like him and Kraft likes him. Like that's the thing is you don't know what his philosophy is going to be. It is very interesting. Getting a chance to talk to Mayo is important because like we don't know. Like we have no idea what he wants this team to be. I'm sure he's going to say modernize and new NFL and speed and, address the offense and this and that. But you don't know what he's going to want to do here. And he's going to be putting coaches and a staff in place. The one upshot to this, I'll say, Taylor, is if the decision was truly made early, and this is where, again, I don't like to crap on copy or people's stories of what went out, but there was a lot of Kraft planted stuff reported that made everything seem bad. Then there was one thing reported that probably came from Bill's that said that Mayo's rubbing people the wrong way and this and that. But
And also, let's talk about the fact that Bill apparently iced Jerod Mayo out.
Yes.
He brought Jerod Mayo onto the coaching staff, recruited him. Right. So when you say that, it does sound like that may have been someone. So
I think that dynamic was probably odd and probably caused some friction because there's a couple things. At the beginning of the year, Belichick's walking around knowing that guy's taking my job. He's there already. It's the number one draft pick. And I'm the aging vet. And at some point or another, they're going to put this guy in. I just don't know when.
And Jimmy.
And that could get icy. But two, Mayo has probably known he knew he was the next head coach. He's probably known since Germany. He's the next head coach next year. And that probably added to the icy dynamic. But on the plus side, I will say it may have contributed to him having put a ton of thought into where he wants to go, who he wants to talk to, and what he wants to do. This isn't a guy who found out 5 days ago that the Patriots job, 2 days ago, find out the Patriots job is opening, comes in cold for an interview, and then is scrambling to find a few of his buddies to come in and put a staff together. Mayo's probably had a great amount of time to think about this and wouldn't be stunned if he's already had put some feelers out, talked to some people on the side and like, hey, when this goes down, are you with me? So I wonder if that's the case. And I wonder if he's prepared to move quickly. Again, all speculative, but because a succession plan was written into a contract, because Mayo's always known that job's probably going to him, and because he's probably known it's going to him sooner than later, and honestly probably knew this year, as we said early, it's interesting. It's very interesting.
And that's what I was saying yesterday, where it would seem odd where one, if he is, now we actually know that it was in his contract, so really we can actually talk about it. It would be odd also if Robert Kraft didn't try to give him a little nudge of like, all right, make sure you're ready. Make sure you're talking to people. It would be very odd if he ends up going in the office. He's like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to figure it out. Also, Jerod Mayo, we know like his expansive background in different fields. I'm sure that he is, I mean, we already know he's great in terms of preparation because they used to call him like Bill Jr. Like when he was a player, he was considered the player version of Bill, except, with charisma and more of a personality. So, yeah, I would be surprised if Mayo is like coming in here cold, not knowing how he wants to fill out the staff or who he wants to retain or potentially bring in.
Yeah. Now I'm going to float a name. You didn't like this name, but I'm floating it anyway. You didn't like a Belichick McDaniels reunion. Do you like a Mayo McDaniels reunion? And I'll tell you why. The Belichick McDaniels is maybe continuity of like running back something that worked a few years ago, and maybe it won't work again. With McDaniels, what you might have is head coaching experience and someone to bring in potentially as an assistant head coach, with the understanding McDaniels is no longer a threat. McDaniels has to know he's never going to get another head coaching job again. How he flamed out spectacularly twice and left the Colts at the altar. No one will ever look to him. And he has to accept that his path is assistant. And where better to do it than the place that you've called home, with the understanding that like I'm okay being a lifetime backup here, and maybe he could come in here and provide a little bit of stability and whatever he has learned from coaching, to have another guy whose only role is, here's some of the stuff that head coaches also do, Jerod, and here's some stuff I can take off your plate, Jerod. Do you think that that's possible?
I do. Obviously, this is assuming that maybe Bill
They might
O'Brien
not like each other. I have no idea, but
right.
It popped into my mind as something that makes a little bit more sense now than before. But honestly, I might even consider doing it and bringing in a new OC to learn under McDaniels, who has his own vision, and not O'Brien. But again, I don't know how it's going to go. I really don't.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really have a problem with the idea of McDaniels coming back. It was more McDaniels if he's working with Bill O'Brien, because that seemed a little weird. The last time those two worked together was when it was clear that McDaniels is taking over for O'Brien because he went off to coach at Penn State.
And McDaniels might just follow Bill to his next job too and make it easy, So
right.
It might not happen,
Yeah, so the offensive situation, again, is very strange because we don't know what Mayo's philosophy is. If he wants to modernize, if he wants to go ground and pound and all that stuff, then yeah, I think McDaniels is your guy because he's the guy who loves having a fullback. He's the one who will run the ball and try to protect a young quarterback. Whereas, Bill O'Brien is more, he has an expansive drop back passing game when he has a quarterback who can execute it. He likes to throw the ball. So, depending on what flavor you want, or if Mayo says, hey, I don't really have a very close relationship with these guys, period. I want to bring in somebody who I like from around the league, who I have some connection with. But yeah, I mean, if he brings back McDaniels, he's proven that he's a very good offensive coordinator. He just needs to be kept on his side of the ball and not be going around talking to people or telling people about, as we're not being the big guy in charge and having those kinds of conversations, because that's where he starts losing people and people start complaining about it publicly.
I wonder. I actually see some merit to that, even though I think like the bet, if you were to, if FanDuel were taking bets here on this, I would guess that following Bill to his next destination is going to go. I'm also going to go flat out and predict that Bill goes to Washington, and it happens very quickly, and he drafts a new quarterback at 2 ahead of 3. And if you have no faith in who Bill Belichick is drafting, you actually want him at 2 drafting there. Wouldn't it be great if Bill goes up to 2 and drafts Joe Alt? Oh my God. What a gift that keeps on giving. So I do wonder there. Real quick, I do want to tell you, FanDuel, if you want to sign up and get in on the action, the NFL playoffs about to begin. And because of the NFL playoffs kicking off, FanDuel, as you know, is the official partner of the NFL and the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network. This is the little playoff special here. Get in on the action. Get 150 in bonus bets when you place a $5 bet. What does that mean? And you have to go to fanduel.com/Boston. That's important to us. What does this mean? You deposit 10, you bet 5, and no matter what, win or lose, you get 150 in bonus bets. It's not actual money, but you can use those bonus bets to win actual money. So again, if you want to get into the action, you haven't signed up yet, fanduel.com/Boston. The best odds, up to the minute. A really easy to use app, super intuitive. So again, check it out. And if you do, please go to fanduel.com/Boston. So they know that we sent you. One other thing I want to tell you about, again, Pat's Interference podcast is coming up in a couple of minutes. Taylor and I are about to jump to give them a little bit of time to get in here into the room and set up. So again, Andrew Callahan of the Boston Herald, terrific reporter. And as we said, it really has a lot of the inside scoop on what's been going on here. Going live at 10 a.m. with Michael Hawley, who, as we said, has been covering and writing about Bill Belichick for half his life, is going to be able to provide some outstanding insight here as the, as like I said, kind of a de facto Bill Belichick historian, which he very much is. Wrapping it up here, Patriots are going to hire Jerod Mayo as their next head coach. News coming just barely 24 hours after the mutually parting of ways with Bill Belichick, which really was not. It was a firing. Bill Belichick was fired by Robert Kraft, and Robert Kraft not only wanted to fire Bill, but he really wanted to hire Mayo. And this is a done deal, and it was headed this way, and now it's here. So again, as Taylor said, very interesting when we talk to Jerod next week and see what he has to say. I think it'd be great, and get his perspective on how things are going to go. And stuff's going to happen fast and furious. GM, staff hires, X, Y, and Z. One of the great things about having a succession plan, Taylor, everyone else is still interviewing. You get your first crack at bringing people in. So Jerod can go run out there, and he's the first one out into the apple orchard. He can just start picking stuff off the trees. So that's kind of a positive thing. They do have a little bit of a jump. Their season's over. They're not in the playoffs. They're not messing around. So he can start to assemble things and get organized and get ready. But you feel like that GM domino is the next one to fall. So we'll see what it has. In a minute or less, closing thoughts here so we can jump out and give these guys a chance to jump in.
I'll just wrap it up with, I know that there's speculation and some people may, be turned off by the inexperience with the fact that you're staying in the Belichick tree, but Jerod Mayo is his own person. He is very, very different. I think this is an exciting move. I think it brings youth. I think it brings a better form of communication. I think there's a lot of things that this organization has been lacking in terms of leadership from their head coach that Mayo will provide. We don't know what his weaknesses are quite yet. No one's perfect, so we'll see how that turns out, but I'm excited for the future. This is a good move in my opinion.
Yep. Someone just floated something that hadn't really popped in my head until now because the Jets have already said that their coaching staff is safe. But man, I do wonder if any team out there is like, yeah, I want Bill. I'm going to fire my guy now, even though I said he was safe. And I wonder if the Jets is just so I believe we talked about some of the things that Bill did being slightly too very petty during the course of this year. Man, would teaming up with Mr. Big Hug Aaron Rodgers and trying to stick it to the Patriots for 2 more years and get that win record where you have a 12.5% chance that that's going to come against the Patriots, because you play them twice a year. That would be something I hadn't really considered. But
I'll throw my hat in the ring because it has been kind of implied that there could be a team that's going to fire their head coach that hasn't yet. Yeah. I think if that's the Cowboys and Mike McCarthy ends up not doing too well in the playoffs, I think we could see Belichick go there because that's a juggernaut. That's a team that he could immediately take to the Super Bowl. So
that's an interesting. I've heard McCarthy. A first-round exit changes a lot of that equation too. And you're right. There are some people who will not tolerate, quick playoff exits because expectations were a lot higher than that for this year. I don't know whether Nick Sirianni's on the hot seat in Philly after what went down there too. So there's more out there, and we've already got 7 vacancies right now. It would not be stunning to see 1 or 2 more coming out. 7 or 8. It's insane right now. So We'll see what happens there. We're going to wrap Pat's Interference, as we said, coming right up. Andrew Callahan and Michael Hawley will be jumping on here and going live. My guess is, since it's 9:59, might be a minute or 2 late, but we're going to jump and we're going to give these guys a chance. So honestly, go to the bathroom, go get a coffee, and jump right back on here. There's a lot more Patriots talk coming up. We thank you guys for joining us now for a second day in a row with this breaking news, and I got to thank my man Amit, super producer. There might be 3 of him. What we're going to find out.
And none of them sleep.
One day I'm gonna see 2 Amits, and I'm gonna be like, I freaking knew it, because there's no way there's just one of this guy, based on what he does from morning all the way through the night for us. Absolute MVP, of CLNS Media. And I'll say it, he won it unanimously this year. And I honestly think I'm just going to name the trophy after him rather than bother awarding it to anybody next year. Really spectacular stuff from Amit. And I cannot thank him enough for just answering the bell every time we've got breaking news, morning, noon, and night. Maybe now we can rest a little bit and we'll have a peaceful weekend before shit starts to get real all over again. But again, thank you guys for hanging out. Thank you for joining us. Pat's Interference coming up at 10. Please subscribe, turn on your notifications, because if you do drift off and forget, ding, a little bell's going to go off and it's going to remind you that we're live. We definitely could use the subs and the likes and all of that stuff. And it helps us get that content out to you, and we can keep pumping it out for free, which is what we always want to do. So thank you guys for hanging out. Thank you, Taylor. Follow Taylor's reporting all day. Taylor, as we said, is going to have a lot more stuff with Patriots Daily coming up. Another edition of Patriots Daily with his boy Chad Graff, again, excellent reporter for The Athletic, also has been really reporting on some of the behind the scenes stuff. So the coverage will not stop. And if you missed it, we rolled out a bunch of stuff yesterday too. Greg Bedard gave his take. Taylor's done some reporting from Foxboro. There's a lot of other things on the channel that you want to check out. So scroll through, check it out, and stay with us for Pass Interference coming right up. See you guys. Hopefully not later